Good morning, good evening, good afternoon. Thank you all so much for joining us. I'm delighted to welcome you to today's Science Talk. I'm your host, Dr. Miriam Axel, and for those of you who are joining us for the first time, we welcome you. For those of you joining us again, we'd like to remind you that you can view this talk, which will be recorded, as well as all of our others from 2025 and the entire series from 2024 hosted by the one and only Professor Grace Oluwasanya on our website. The website is the unu.edu/INWEH/science-talks with an S. Today's talk, like all others, will be recorded and we'll conclude with an interactive question and answer session. So I remind you to please put your questions in the Q&A box and I will share them with our speaker afterwards. Don't wait until the very last minute. Feel free to put your questions in at any point and I will make sure to read them to our speaker. And now I'm delighted to introduce today's topic, which is the subsidiarity principle in water governance, a Swedish perspective, and our speaker, Dr. Rolf Larsson, who is the Executive Director of the UNU Hub on Water in a Changing Environment, which is a collaboration between Lund University in Sweden and UNU-INWEH. Dr. Larsson is a senior lecturer in water resources engineering in the Faculty of Engineering at Lund University, and he has a PhD from Lund University, which focused on the Coriolis effects in turbulent channel flow. Dr. Larsson has a rich and varied background in computational fluid dynamics, snow hydrology, and urban flood management. Over the past decade, his work has centered on sustainable approaches to urban flooding, including leading a nationally funded project on sustainable urban flood management. He also served as head of the Department of Building and Environmental Engineering at Lund University from 2009 to 2014. And now it is my great pleasure to introduce you. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Rolf Larsson. Over to you.
All right. Thank you very much, Miriam, for the nice introduction. Thanks to UNU-INWEH for inviting me to speak. And let me open up the presentation. Are we okay now?
Yes, perfect.
Okay, so the topic, as you already said, the subsidiarity principle in water governance, a Swedish perspective. So I'd like to start by giving you like my motives for talking on this topic, which I never did before. So I sort of have two starting points why I chose this topic, and I will give you both of them. So first one is myself as a starting point and my location on the globe. So our university is at Lund, which is in the very south of Sweden. And my hometown is Malmö, which is just a few kilometers away from Lund. So I'm trying to show you the sort of different political levels in Sweden on the right-hand side. So these concentric, almost circles, starting with Malmö, where I live, which is part of the region Skåne. And Skåne is one of the regions in the country of Sweden. And since 1995, Sweden is a member state of the European Union. And this happened, as I said, back in 1995. And for many of us, the word subsidiarity and the subsidiarity principle was completely new. I think no one in Sweden had heard about it before we entered the European Union. But now it has become sort of a concept which is very well known because it is used a lot in the European Union as a bearing principle, the subsidiarity principle for the governance of the European Union and the member states. So So that is one starting point for this talk. The other one is me and some colleagues of mine have been advocating a national water strategy for Sweden for some time, and we actually started a faculty research project as a sort of a basis for such a national water strategy. That project was started a year ago, and it has six postdocs from 6 faculties at Lund University, because we have quite a good network of researchers working with water from all the faculties at Lund University. So we have a good basis for doing transdisciplinary or multidisciplinary work related to water. And we think there is a great need for such a national water strategy for Sweden. And I have put the Nationale Wasserstrategie for Germany at the bottom as some kind of a pathfinder, maybe it's the right word. So anyhow, I've been talking about this national water strategy on several occasions lately, so I was a bit tired of that, but I had something similar in mind, so I figured, why not talk about the subsidiarity principle in water governance, which I must confess, I'd never heard this mentioned before, but it turns out I'm obviously not the first one to sort of note the importance of this principle in water governance. So, okay, let me get started. Well, this is just a sort of two paintings which I showed just to illustrate how you can think differently about governance and how you can govern in different ways, actually in very many different ways. But this talk has this synopsis, so I'll start with the background. I already started. I will go through the definitions of the subsidiarity principle and water governance, and then I'll speak specifically about those two concepts together, how they fit, and then I'll go over to water governance in Sweden, and which obviously then also relates to water governance in the European Union. And I hope I have some conclusions when I come to the end. Okay. So a little bit more about background. So you already mentioned where I'm coming from. So let me just repeat a little bit. I'm a civil engineer by training. I've done some various types of research over the years. I started working in the north of Sweden, so it was natural to deal with things related to the meteorological or climatological conditions. So snow hydrology and also ice-covered lakes were some topics I worked with. And then moving over to computational fluid dynamics, which I did for many years. And then I started working with urban flooding essentially in 2015. And the reason for this was actually some happenings in the region here. So in Copenhagen, Denmark, Copenhagen is the capital of Denmark, and it's situated very close to us here. And in fact, our region here belonged to Denmark a couple of 100 years ago. But anyhow, in Copenhagen in 2011, they had a huge downpour of water, a big rainstorm, and a lot of urban flooding and a lot of damage. A few years later, there was a similar event in Malmö, Sweden, the city where I live, in 2014. Also, an extreme amount of rain falling within just a few hours. A lot of damage was created. And so the year after, in 2015, we applied for funding to do a study on what we call sustainable urban flood management. And it was around that time that I somehow realized the importance of governance. Before this time, I was more of a hardcore engineer, maybe you could say, and I was thinking mainly in terms of engineering solutions to various water issues and problems. And it became obvious before and after these two events in Copenhagen and Malmö that you are totally dependent on functioning governance and governance structure in order to achieve some real on the ground change. So that was sort of like a wake up moment for myself. But I had also been interested in the history of the European Union Water Framework Directive, and so I had some experience from the story of the initiation of the Framework Directive and also how it was transposed into Swedish law when it all started. So that's a little bit more of where I'm coming from here. Just a few words about Sweden. Sweden is a country in the north of Europe. Small country in terms of population, but rather a large country for European conditions in area. Excuse me. Since we're talking about governance, so it becomes interesting to say a few words like about municipalities. So local level administrations done in municipalities. There are 290 municipalities in Sweden. Where I live, Malmö, we have a population of 365,000. The smallest municipality in Sweden, up in the north somewhere, has a population of 2,300. So there is a wide range in the size of municipalities, and the median is a population of Swedish municipalities is actually as low as 16,000. And this is an important fact, actually, when you're dealing with some types of, how can you say, municipal sectors, and especially for things that require a lot of technical, high-level technical competence, like in many water issues. The water balance of Sweden is here. So from the right, you have precipitation, and in the middle, you have evaporation or evapotranspiration, and on the left, you have runoff. And you see the numbers, and you can sort of imagine there is something happening in the northwest, a great big gradients of both precipitation and runoff, and that is because there is a mountain range on the border between Sweden and Norway. Here are some of the water users in Sweden. So we have, excuse me. We have the water utilities, which they deal with both the water and sewage. We have hydropower, which is a very big contributor for electricity in Sweden. And we have also agriculture in Sweden, especially in the south, but actually there are some agricultural activities all over the country. Not too much of irrigation, but some. So all those sectors are important water users. There are others, but I will only mention these. So getting to the definition. So the subsidiarity principle is, like it says here, it's a guiding concept in politics, governance, and organizational decision-making. It holds that matters should be handled by the smallest, lowest, or least centralized competent authority. Essentially, decisions should be made as close to the people they affect as possible, unless a higher level of authority can handle the issue more effectively. So it's sort of a, I would call it like a democratic principle, a little bit of a bottom-up approach. But it should be noted here, the words that I put in bold, like competent. So sometimes, even though there are low-level authorities that maybe one would have in mind for dealing with matters, but they don't have the competence to do it, then you have to shift the level for decisions one step up. And it's also a matter of efficiency, like it's stated here. So I think you can imagine what are the ideas behind that. I don't think I would read all of the text here. So first bullet here, empower local levels. So what you want to do by abiding to this principle. You want to have efficiency and effectiveness, and you want to have some checks on central power. So it's a way of sort of decentralizing power and decision making, and I would say it makes the whole process more democratic, if you like. Water governance, I put it here for reference. I think everybody who is with us knows what water governance is, but this is the definition I found. Water governance refers to the political, social, economic, and administrative systems that influence how water is managed and used. And it's about who makes decisions about water, how those decisions are made, and how authority and responsibilities are distributed among different stakeholders. So then it becomes obvious that the subsidiarity principle is, or could be at least, very relevant for water governance. It could be a matter of a choice whether you want to abide by the subsidiarity principles or not, but still it is something which is obviously relevant for water governance. And actually, it turns out that you could say that already in the Dublin principles, this subsidiarity principle was implicitly mentioned. It's not explicitly mentioned, but implicitly. So Dublin Principle number 2 says water development and management should be based on a participatory approach involving users, planners, and policymakers at all levels. So the important thing here is at all levels. Then if you look at what kind of political administrative levels you have in a country, so for water governance, the lowest level would then be the river basin, and you have then typically national level and maybe also like regional levels. And as it says here, this bullet, lowest political level is a river basin, and whenever possible decisions should be made, they should be made at this level. That is, if you want to abide by the subsidiarity principle. I skipped the examples. And then you could start thinking about which type of decisions are not suitable for the lower levels, which decisions have to be made at higher levels. And you could maybe think about what I put here, risk levels. So you want to have, how can you say, a common acceptable risk level, maybe for all your river basins in the country. You want to provide a suitable planning horizon, like if you're thinking about climate adaptation, what is the time horizon you should be aiming for? And also, I think obviously how you operate at the river basin level has to be decided upon in some way at a higher level. And if you have several higher levels, then you need to think about which is the appropriate one. So, but I'll move on. So, which conditions are necessary in order to achieve results at river basin level? So, if you want to work according to the subsidiarity principle, so you would shift your decisions or many of decisions and governance to the lower level for water governance, then that would be the river basin or river basin authorities. So what are the conditions that are necessary in order for this river basin authority or similar? Which are the conditions that are necessary for that organization to operate in a reasonable way? So I listed just 4 here. So legal authority. So there has someone at the higher level must give the river basin authority the legality to operate, obviously, I think, and you have to have executive power. So you have to be able to take decisions and give orders, more or less. And also you need financial means because you cannot do very much without money. And a 4th one is you have to have the capacity, and I'm thinking here mainly in terms of competence. So it's a little bit like I mentioned previously for the Swedish example with the very small municipalities. They have difficulty with finding or accommodating the proper competence for solving technical issues. So these conditions have to be in place. And a little bit of repetition here. So what are the links between, say, national level and river basin level? So again, the 4 bullet points here. The government will give the river basin authority its legal status. It should also provide financial means. And then basically the river basin authority can act in an independent way and it can report back to government. It comes to my mind that I'm thinking in terms of the Swedish example, where we don't really have any major, how can you say, multinational river basins. So due to the special geography and topography, virtually all river basins are completely on Swedish soil. So we don't have to collaborate or negotiate with other countries, which obviously complicates matters like this. So pros and cons of subsidiarity in water governance. So pros. So when you do this, how can you say, lowest level of management or governance, so you then have local knowledge within the organization about both the ecology, hydrology, and about the local stakeholders as well. So local knowledge is one big advantage of working according to subsidiarity principle. And also rules and regulations are usually seen as more legitimate if the stakeholders and the people have a less of a distance to the people who are making the decisions. It's easier to accept those decisions, rules, and regulations. And in the end, this way of governing should be more efficient. The problems or cons or disadvantages could be limited capacity, like I already mentioned. If there's not enough competence, then it doesn't work very well. And there could be also special political conditions that would make things a bit difficult, and the whole process could be, how can you say, hijacked by some political fractions. Now, turning to the Swedish example again. So the system in Sweden is based on 3 levels. So we have national level, we have the regional level, and we have the local level. So national level, we have an elected parliament. At the local level, we have municipalities with also elected council. At the regional level in Sweden, it's slightly more complicated. So we have so-called regions, which also have politically elected councils. But then we have something called CAB, or county administrative boards. They're also operating on the geographical level of regions, but they're not politically run organizations. There are no political council or anything like that. They are just representing the national government at this regional level. And it actually makes things a bit difficult to understand, I think, also for Swedish citizens. I think many Swedish citizens don't understand the difference between these two types of organizations. But anyhow, they are there. Here is a map showing somehow this how it works. So if we go from the big scale to the smaller scale, so we have the European Union with the Commission, which is part of our sort of legal framework, if you like. Then we have the national ones with various agencies. Then we have the regional with those 2 organizations. And then we have the very local level with the municipalities. And also we have something we'll call water councils, which I will come back to. Now let's move up a little step to the European Union. So water in the EU system. If you go to the website of water in European Union, so you find this one, and it says the aim of the European Commission and the European Union with regards to water is to protect the EU's water resources and ecosystems, and ensuring all Europeans have access to clean drinking and bathing water. And here for you is interesting novelty also for Europeans. So with the new Commission, which came into action last year, actually, we now have for the first time a commissioner for water. Not only water, but she is European Commissioner for Environment, Water Resilience, and a competitive circular economy. But this is the first time that water is explicitly under a responsibility of one dedicated European commissioner. So the Commission and the commissioners is a bit like the European government in a sense. It's not the same, but there are commissioners who are responsible for a number of sectors. So this is important for everybody who likes water in Europe, that we now have this dedicated commissioner for water. And there will be during 2025, with a high degree of probability, there will be an EU water resilience strategy in place, which will become important for all of us working in the water sector. And for Swedish people, there is an extra bonus, is that this commissioner, she is Swedish, Jessica Rosvall, as the name is pronounced in Swedish. Okay, so what do they do with water in the EU? In the European Union, much of the policy and politics are executed via something called directives. So for water, there are a number of water-related directives. I'll focus on 2 of them, the Water Framework Directive from year 2000, which is the overarching EU directive for water protection. So it has a goal that all inland waters, that is lakes and rivers, in the European Union, all the waters in the EU should achieve good ecological status, as the terminology goes, and that should happen in the year 2009, which obviously has passed. So what is happening is this work is still ongoing. It will probably go on for many years still. The other directive I want to mention specifically is the Floods Directive, slightly younger, from 2007. It aims to reduce and manage flood risks. So from my personal point of view, I like very much these directives from the European Union, because I think they have changed things in Sweden for the better. I will get back to that, I think. So there, as you see, there are other water-related directives as well, but I will not speak about them. So Water Framework Directive and Principle of Catchment-Based Water Management. So this is a direct quote from the Water Framework Directive. So it's sort of a legal language. Article 3 in the Water Framework Directive speaks about coordination of administrative arrangements within river basin districts. And what this says basically is that water governance should be organized via natural boundaries. So you should, or each country should, work with water governance based on river basin, I can say, boundaries. And this could seem, I think, natural for most of us. I think maybe all of us here, but this was not the case in Sweden before year 2000. So water governance, which was mainly about water quality, was organized via the sort of general political system in Sweden, meaning that we were using administrative boundaries, so municipalities and regions. And many of our river basins obviously would then cross borders, and it was not efficient at all, and sort of not a very ideal situation. So after the introduction of the Water Framework Directive, Sweden was pushed into a corner somehow to rearrange how water governance is done. Now, I put the question below here: is this in accordance with the subsidiarity principle? I think basically it is, because, and also if you read the Water Framework Directive, it's a lot about stakeholder participation and this thing about working according to natural boundaries. And it's very natural to end up with something which is basically appropriate for the subsidiarity principle. So I think the answer is yes to this question here. Now, if we go to the other directive, so here, Floods Directive and Principle of Catchment-Based Water Management. So if you look at the legal text of the Floods Directive, it says in Article 3, however, for the implementation of this directive, member states may appoint competent authorities different from those identified from blah, 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 blah. So that is different from in the Water Framework Directive. So here it is left to the member states to organize their work under this directive, and they don't have to work with river basin or natural boundaries. And Sweden has chosen not to do that. So is this in accordance with the subsidiarity principle? I said I would say it depends. So there is no clear answer here. It's delegated to the member states to make decisions about how they want to organize their work with the Floods Directive. So whether or not this is in accordance with the subsidiarity principle, depends on how the individual member states decides to work with this. So this is how these two directives are organized and how they're, how can you say, transposed into Swedish legislation. So on the left, you have the directives, and starting from the top, so you have the Water Framework Directive. There is a national agency, or actually there are 5 national agencies in Sweden. They're called water authorities. There are 5 of them we'll see on a map shortly. And then there are some other agencies assisting. But the main national agency are those 5 water authorities. So the other directive, the Floods Directive, the agency in charge is something called the Swedish Civil Contingencies Agency. There is only one main agency who is responsible, and some of the work is delegated to those county administrative boards. And there are 21 of those. So 21 county administrative boards are doing some action plans related to the Floods Directive, while there is only one national agency. So here are these 5 water authorities in Sweden, and you can, well, maybe you cannot. So let me tell you that Sweden is surrounded mainly a lot by water. We have Norway on the west, in the west of us, Finland on the east, but actually we have the Baltic Sea from the very north of Sweden down to the very south, and then we have the North Sea on the west coast. And the water authorities are geographically divided, so they should, how can you say, follow river basin boundaries. But there are many river basins in each territory of each water authority, and you can see one of those districts on the right-hand side is called Bottenviken district with 30 river basins, and that is sort of, how can you say, topography decides the shape of these river basins. So we have this mountain range between Sweden and Norway in the northwest, and the water flows from the mountains to the Baltic Sea. So all the river basins are elongated, like you see, from northwest to southeast. Okay, so is this in accordance with the subsidiarity principle? I would say, if you look at it like this, maybe it could be, but maybe it also could not be. And the reason is that you have one water authority, in this case, working with 30 river basins, and then it depends on how they organize their work, whether this would be in accordance with the subsidiarity principle or not. So we cannot really say just from this figure here with the 2 maps. But let's take a look a bit more closer. So issues in Sweden with Water Framework Directive and Floods Directive. So for the Water Framework Directive, we have 5 water authorities. And what are the issues here? So the issues with those water authorities is that they have weak executive power. So although they have been created by the government around year 2000 in order to work with the Water Framework Directive, they are not very strong. They cannot really give any orders about what should be done. Instead, they make an analysis and they come up with a plan for what should be done, but they have to make things happen indirectly via municipalities and those county administration boards, so they cannot really make any hard decisions themselves. They are dependent on those other authorities, if you like. They don't really have any money themselves. There is money to keep like secretariat, so they have number of people working with water for in the district, making analysis and making plans and action plans, but they don't have any money to allocate for actions. So weak financial muscles is a problem. And you can also say that due to the rather limited funding, they do not have the local competence to cover, like if you remember the previous slide, one district had like 30 river basins, and I don't know, I would think that there are only like 10 people or something, maybe 10 experts working in the water authority, and it's not really enough to have the local competence that is needed. At the same time, there is something called water councils, which are more or less true river basin organizations. They are not a part of the water authorities, but somehow they could be seen as assisting organizations. So what are the water councils? There are 200 of them in Sweden. I put here that they're true river basin authorities, which I think is maybe a little bit of an exaggeration. However, they are organized along those river basins. Some of them, those river basins, are in a Swedish context rather big in the north, and here in the south where I live, they are rather small in area. But still, they are organized according to the river basin boundaries. However, there is no obligation for anybody to initiate such water councils. So they are initiated on a voluntary basis, more or less, and the members who are making up those river basin authorities or water councils, they are essentially, how can you say, riparian municipalities, the municipalities who have land in the river basin, together with other important stakeholders like some water users like industry, maybe some big farms and so on. But they are voluntary, so which is maybe a strength, but is also a weakness. They don't really have any legal status, and there are big variations in ambitious and focus areas. So they deal with different things. Some of those water councils are very, how can you say, good, and some of them are not so good and not so ambitious. So it's a big variation there. Is this in accordance with the subsidiarity principle? I would say, yeah, or something like this. So if you just look at the water authorities, the answer would be, from my point of view, it would be yes, but not to a high degree. However, if you have water councils, some of the good ones, it is in accordance with the subsidiarity principle, but they don't have a legal status. So maybe I take that back. It could be, but I think due to this fact that they don't really have a legal status, they don't have the power to act. They can act, but it's more on a voluntary basis. So it is also like 50-50 maybe, if this is according to the subsidiarity principle. If we then go to the other directive, the floods directive. So what do we have here? We have one agency for the whole of Sweden. they have limited competence, actually, it turns out, to deal with flooding because of the history of this agency. They were appointed when the Floods Directive was transposed into Swedish law, so back in 2007. But before that, they haven't really worked with hydrology or water very much. They were focused on other types of activities. And they still suffer a bit from limited competence. So which means that instead they work with consultants and other specialist national agencies. So they are a bit weak from that point of view. And as a little, how can you say, extra comment, they started with the wrong focus, I would say, for Sweden, but that's another story. I won't go into that. This main agency for the Floods Directive, they also work with the county administrative boards, the 21 boards, who are responsible for producing some action plans for some hot spots with regards to flooding. But then you're back to this sort of original problem that the county administrative boards, they have political administrative borders. They don't have their, how can you say, authority outside their territories, and those are non-natural borders. They are totally artificial borders, if you like. And also, they're quite weak, and there is something wrong with the legislation, according to my mind. They don't really have the means to enforce implementation of action plans. So they make action plans, but they cannot really enforce the implementation. So they are usually working just like the water authorities. They're making plans, like action plans, and maybe nothing wrong with those action plans, but the thing is they then depend on other actors to make things happen, and usually it's by giving fictitious, if you like, orders to other national agencies or to municipalities that you need to do this and that. And often then in turn, those organizations have to deal with like other stakeholders, like maybe landowners, industries, and what have you. As an interesting little fact is that when I read one of those action plans, one of those county administrative boards, they, in the report, even they claimed that the CAB itself was not legally bound by the plan it had just produced. It's a very strange statement, but still. Is this in accordance with the subsidiarity principle? I would say no. More issues in Sweden with the Water Framework Directive and Floods Directive. So coordination between the two directives. So according to the legal text from the European Union, those the work with those directives should be coordinated, which seems reasonable and logical. However, such coordination is in Sweden basically lacking. And this conclusion was also made by the European Commission. So they have a system whereby the European Commission checks the member states that they do their work according to the directives. So in 2019, there was a report about how the member states are performing with these directives. And for Sweden, it was said that this coordination is not working. It's more or less lacking. And I had the privilege of reading the official Swedish answer. when such an answer was requested from the Commission. And it was like a horror story, if you like. It was Kafka-style, diplomatic, no content answer. And it little bit was another starting point for my being interested in these topics. Very weird to read the official answer from the Swedish government, which was a total nonsense answer.
Dr. Larsson, just want to let you know that we have only 10 minutes left.
Yep. Yeah, I'm almost done. Is this in accordance with the subsidiarity principle? I would say no. So I have an article published on this topic together with some colleagues from countries in the neighboring countries. So you can see on the map which countries they were. So we're studying this coordination between the directives in those countries. Conclusions, my last slide. Subsidiarity principle is a positive attribute of national water governance. Existence of SP is not binary, it's a matter of degree. So quite often it's like a percentage answer which is necessary. It is not enough to put this subsidiarity principle in an organizational chart. You also have to have some conditions fulfilled. That is, that low-level organization, which is to make decisions and policies. It has to have legal power. It has to have funding, obviously. And in Sweden, water governance, especially with relation to Water Framework Directive and Floods Directive, exhibits some of adherence to subsidiarity principle, but only to a very limited degree, is my personal opinion. And there is the finishing line. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Larsson. That was really interesting. I appreciate both how you brought in, what initially got you interested in this question and the deep dive that you took us through. Thank you very much. We have a couple of questions, but maybe I'll start with my colleague, Professor Grace.
Yeah, thank you. I'm just wondering, from what you know, is there a way forward? Can this actually be improved? Knowing that the Water Framework Directive in Europe supersedes, in a way, the national water directive. So from your experience, what you know, do you think there is a chance that we can move towards the subsidiarity principle in this context? Fully.
I think it is possible, but speaking from the perspective or the example of Sweden, I think it's very difficult because it's a lot of politics involved, and it's a system which is quite, how can you say, it has a lot of inertia. It's difficult to move in some directions, but it's not impossible, and I think it is necessary that we go in that direction. And I think maybe the increased, how can you say, interest in water as a topic, and now for us in Europe with this upcoming water resilience strategy from the European Union, I think politicians in Sweden will be more interested in improving water governance in Sweden. So I think there is some hope, but it is a slow process for sure.
Can it be enforced? Can the EU enforce it at the center? Now that you have at least an EC, a commissioner dedicated to water, do you think it can be enforced from the center?
No, I think enforced is not the proper word. it's kind of sensitive. Everything. I think in many of the member states, it's always a sensitive issue what is enforced from the European level. So they have to, how can you say, tread carefully. So I think it's more like maybe this nudging thing that has to be done. But so I think if we have a community of people here, water professionals who want to see more of this subsidiarity principle and some changes, we have to do our work and try to, how can you say, move the national politicians or the government, and then hope for some help from the European Commission, actually, that they want to see things changing in the same direction, I think, as water professionals, maybe not all of us, but many of us who want to see.
Thank you.
I want to ask about your the idea that decision making should be as close to the people as possible, and you talked about this as a bottom up approach. Are there any specific examples that you have that water related decisions that shouldn't be made at the local level? You know, is there a line that we should draw?
So one example that is somehow related has to do with flooding and climate adaptation. So for climate adaptation in Sweden at the moment, a lot of that climate adaptation is the responsibility is at the municipal level, and that might be you can say okay from the point of view of the subsidiarity principle. The problem and what is, how can you say, the wish of many municipalities is that they want a little bit more of strict orders, if you like, from the national level about what are the actual levels that you should work along. I mean, what are the risks that should be risk levels that should be accepted when they start their work? Also things like, what is the planning horizon? Should they plan for 50 years ahead or 100 years ahead or whatever? So this is one area where the municipalities in Sweden want to have more orders, more top-down approach. At the moment, they're sort of left to make their own decisions, which results in some strange things where levels change from one side from one municipality to another, and near the border it becomes really strange.
I think we've just a minute left, so I'll turn it over to our director, Professor Madani.
Oh, there he is.
Thank you for the insightful presentation. So I think it's more like writing a policy brief, because this is very relevant, and I think it's very informative. I think what you have there constitute a good has enough content for making a policy brief. But I also think that colleagues at UNWE can facilitate a conversation with also people in Canada, because Canada recently launched a Canada Water Agency, and there's a lot of confusion about how a new federal level entity should function, and then where and coordinate with the provincial level entities. And the confusion is there, probably lessons to be learned from EU and how things function or failed, or what the inconsistencies and the issues are. So I think that would be something helpful. So I know I have no questions, but just wanted to thank you on behalf of UNU-INWEH for your wonderful presentation, and we look forward to learning more about the activities of the hub at Lund University.
All right, thank you very much. So just let me know who I should be in contact with about this possibility of writing policy version.
We will, sure.
Yep.
Thank you. Do
All
we
right.
have questions from the online people or?
No, there's.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you
Okay.
very much.
Thank you very much.